Chapter 1: The Message That Changed Everything. I was folding clothes in my boutique when my husband ended our 15-year marriage with a text message. No warning, no conversation, just a message saying he was leaving. He had already drained our joint account, and he was starting over with someone younger. I didn't cry or scream. I finished helping my customer and went back to work, because what he didn't know was this. I had already noticed the late nights, the hidden phone, the way he talked about my business like it was nothing. I had already prepared, and the moment he thought that text had destroyed me was the exact moment his control began to slip. My name is Marin Holt, and this is the story of what really happened after he underestimated me. I was standing behind the counter folding a silk blouse when my phone vibrated against the wood, the sound so ordinary that it barely registered at first. The store smelled like linen spray and leather handbags, the familiar scent of a place I had built piece by piece over the last 12 years. A longtime customer was browsing near the window, my assistant was adjusting a display, and outside the afternoon traffic moved the way it always did, slow and predictable. That was when I looked down. The message was from Matthew. We had been married for 15 years, long enough that his name on my screen usually meant groceries or a reminder about the car insurance. Instead, it was a block of text that felt like it had been typed quickly, without hesitation or second thoughts. He said he was done. He said he was leaving. He said he had already transferred most of the money out of our joint account. He added that he was starting over with someone younger and that it was time for me to accept reality. There was no apology, no explanation, no attempt to soften the blow. I read it twice, then a third time, not because I did not understand it, but because my body had not caught up yet. My hands did not shake. My breathing stayed steady. I folded the blouse exactly the way I always did and placed it back on the shelf before walking a few steps toward the register to help my customer. I remember hearing my own voice and being surprised by how normal it sounded. I asked if she was looking for a gift or something for herself. I smiled when she joked about treating herself for surviving another work week. I rang up her purchase, wrapped it in tissue paper, and thanked her for coming in. Only after she left did I look at my phone again. The second wave was not shock, it was something sharper. The casual cruelty of it sank in. He had not just left, he had made sure to tell me that he believed I was replaceable, outdated, and financially powerless without him. That part hurt more than the affair. Matthew had always liked to present himself as the practical one in our marriage. He worked in supply chain management for a regional distribution firm, the kind of job that sounded impressive to people who did not ask many questions. I owned this boutique, a space that catered mostly to women who valued quality over trends, women who knew who they were and did not feel the need to prove it. Over the years, he had started calling my business a hobby. He joked about how cute it was that I still enjoyed working retail. He would comment on the age of my customers, on the way they dressed, on how different they were from the women he worked with. Younger women, more energetic women, women who, according to him, still had options. I had told myself those comments were harmless, a midlife phase, stress, anything but what they actually were. I walked into the back office and locked the door. The room was quiet except for the hum of the old printer in the corner. I sat down at my desk and opened my banking app. The balance confirmed what his message had already said. The account we used for household expenses was nearly empty. Rent, utilities, insurance, groceries, all the money that passed through that account every month had been reduced to a number so small it felt insulting. What surprised me was not the transfer itself, it was how carefully timed it was. He had waited until the middle of the week, when most automatic payments had already cleared, when I would not notice until it was too late to stop him. He thought he had been clever. I stared at the screen for a long moment and tried to name what I was feeling. It was not panic. It was not even fear. It was the heavy realization that someone I had trusted for half my adult life believed I was incapable of surviving without him. Outside the office door, I could hear my assistant laughing with a customer. The sound grounded me. This place was real. The work I had done was real. The life I had built existed whether Matthew acknowledged it or not. I put my phone down and leaned back in my chair. Our marriage had followed a pattern that felt familiar to many couples we knew. We met in our late 20s, married quickly, supported each other through early career struggles. I took the risk of opening the boutique while he worked a stable job that paid the bills. Over time, the store grew. It became profitable. It became mine in a way nothing else in my life ever had. Matthew tolerated it until it no longer fit the image he wanted for himself. The last year had been full of small moments I had tried to ignore. Him coming home later than usual, new clothes that did not match his old style, passwords changed without explanation, the way he dismissed my questions with a laugh, telling me I was overthinking things. I had told myself not to jump to conclusions. I had told myself that long marriages went through phases. But standing there, reading his message, I understood something with painful clarity. This did not come out of nowhere. I picked up my phone again and scrolled through the message one more time. The final line stuck with me the most. He said I would be fine because I still had my little store to keep me busy. Little. That word echoed in my head. I closed the app and slipped the phone into my bag. There would be time to deal with the practical fallout later. For now, the store still needed me. My staff still needed me. My life did not stop because Matthew decided to rewrite his. I unlocked the office door and stepped back onto the floor. My assistant looked up and asked if everything was okay. I told her yes, that I just needed a minute. As the afternoon went on, I moved through my routines with almost mechanical precision. I answered emails, I checked inventory, I made notes about a shipment arriving next week. Anyone watching would have seen a woman fully in control of her environment. What they couldn't see was the weight settling in my chest. It was not grief for the marriage, that had been unraveling for some time. It was the anger that came from being underestimated, from realizing that the person who knew me best had reduced me to a stereotype he was ready to discard. When I finally closed the shop for the day and turned the sign on the door, I stood there for a moment with my hand on the lock. The street lights were coming on, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. This place had survived recessions, pandemics, and trends that came and went. I had survived them too. Matthew thought he had ended something. What he didn't understand yet was that I was not afraid of being alone. I was afraid of how certain he was that I would not be able to stand on my own. And that belief, more than the money he took or the woman he left with, was what told me everything I needed to know about what came next.
Chapter 2. What I did before he ever left. If I am going to tell this the way it happened, I need to be honest about one thing upfront. The names I used in my head that day are not the names I would use now. Not after what followed. Not after I learned how quickly a person can turn your private life into public gossip. So, call me Marin Holt. I was 41 then. Call him Grant. He was 46. The boutique was mine. A small brick front shop in a walkable neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio, the kind of place where women stopped in after work and on Saturdays, where we knew each other's first names and kept spare umbrellas by the door when the weather turned. My company was set up as an LLC because my accountant insisted I do it right from the beginning, and because I liked the feeling of something in my life being clean and official. When I look back, I cannot pinpoint a single moment when I knew Grant was slipping away. It was more like a slow change in air pressure. You do not notice it until your ears start to ring. It began with his hours.
Grant had always worked long days in operations for a medical supply distributor. Busy seasons, audits, late deliveries, I had heard every explanation. But then the long days became the default. He stopped texting when he was running late. He stopped calling on his drive home. He would walk in with his phone already in his hand and his eyes already somewhere else. I remember one night in early fall, the kind of night when the sky turns dark before dinner and the streets smell like wet leaves. I had reheated pasta and covered it with foil twice. When Grant finally came in, he did not say sorry. He said, "What did you do with the mail?" I held my fork in midair and stared at him, waiting for the follow-up that did not come. I said, "Hi to you too?" He exhaled like I was the one making things difficult and headed straight to the kitchen counter. His phone flashed in his palm. He turned the screen down when he noticed me looking. That was the first time I felt something in my stomach drop without knowing why. Over the next few weeks, there were little things that would not have mattered on their own. A new passcode on his phone when he had never cared before, a second charger in his car when he had always just used mine, his cologne suddenly stronger, more expensive, not the kind he would have picked, and the way he talked about my work shifted, subtle at first, then sharper. One Saturday, I was steaming dresses in the back room when he wandered in, hands in his pockets, scanning the racks as if he were in a museum. "You still get people coming in for this stuff?" he said. I stepped out holding a hanger, trying to keep my tone light. "People like clothes that fit," I said. "People like being treated like they matter." He laughed. Not cruel exactly, but dismissive. "Sure, I just mean, most women want something more modern, like the girls at my office." The girls at my office. That phrase landed like a thumb pressed into a bruise. I said, "The women who shop here are modern. They just do not dress like they are auditioning for attention." Grant smirked and shrugged. "I'm just saying," he said, "maybe you could do something to keep up. Things change. People change." People change. He said it like a warning. I tried to address it directly once, in a moment when the house was quiet and I thought maybe he would actually listen. We were in the living room after dinner. The TV was on, but neither of us was watching. He was scrolling on his phone. I asked, "Are you happy?" He did not look up. "That's a big question." I said, "I'm asking because you feel far away lately." He smiled at the screen like whatever he was reading was funnier than our marriage. "I'm tired, Marin. Work is stressful. Not everything is about you." I felt heat rise in my face. "I'm not making it about me. I'm trying to talk to my husband." He finally looked up, and the look in his eyes was not anger. It was impatience, like I was an errand he had forgotten to run. "You worry too much," he said. "You always have. It's why you run that little shop like a fortress. You think something is always about to happen." Little shop, fortress, the words sat there between us. I wanted to argue. I wanted to press him until he gave me something real. Instead, I swallowed my pride because I still believed the version of him I married was somewhere inside the man on my couch. But the uneasy feeling did not go away. It grew teeth. The first thing I did was not dramatic. It was quiet. It was boring. It was the kind of thing women do when they have learned the hard way that hoping is not a plan. I opened a new checking account at a different bank. I picked a branch across town where no one knew us. The lobby smelled like carpet cleaner and coffee. A young teller with neat braids and a kind face asked how she could help. Her name tag said Alyssa. I said, "I need to open an individual account." She smiled. "Absolutely. Are we setting this up as your primary checking?" My throat tightened on the word primary. I said, "Not primary, just separate." Alyssa did not ask why. She just nodded the way women do when they understand without needing details. She slid paperwork across the counter, explained direct deposit options, and asked if I wanted paper statements or online only. "Online only," I said quickly, then paused and added, "And please do not mail anything to my home address." She looked at me for a beat, then said softly, We can set it to electronic delivery only. If you ever need a secure mailing address, we can use a P.O. box or the branch for pickup depending on policy. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Thank you, I said. From there, I moved slowly. I did not drain anything. I did not make sudden transfers that would ping his attention. I simply redirected what was mine. My boutique had been profitable for years, not glamorous money, but steady. I paid myself a modest salary, reinvested most of the rest, kept clean books. I asked my accountant, Peter Shaw, to meet me on a Tuesday morning before the shop opened. Peter was the kind of man who wore pressed shirts and spoke in calm sentences even when delivering bad news. We sat in my office with coffee, and I told him I wanted to make sure my personal and business finances were airtight. He said, "They already are, Marin. Your LLC is separate. You do not commingle, your payroll is documented, your inventory and expenses are accounted for. Why the sudden worry?" I hesitated, then said, "I think my marriage might be changing. I need to be prepared." Peter leaned back, eyes narrowing just a little, not judgmental, more focused. Then he said, "Preparation is not revenge. Preparation is responsibility. If you want, I can print a full packet of your last 3 years, profit and loss, payroll summaries, and the documentation showing the business is yours." I felt my eyes sting, and I hated that my body wanted to cry over paperwork. I said, "Yes, please." The next call I made was to a family attorney. Her name was Denise Park. A friend had given me her number with a warning that Denise was sharp and efficient and did not sugarcoat. When I sat in Denise's office, the walls lined with framed diplomas, she asked me one question before anything else. "Do you feel safe?" she asked. I blinked. Safe? Denise wested her pen on a legal pad. "Emotionally and financially," she said. "Do you believe your husband would try to punish you if he left?" I didn't want to answer. Answering made it real, but my silence was an answer on its own. Denise nodded once. "Then we talk about how to protect you, not how to hurt him. Protect you." She asked about assets, about the house, about accounts, about the business structure. I told her what I could. She gave me a list of what to gather, statements, tax returns, corporate filings, and she told me to keep copies somewhere my husband could not access. When I left her office, the sun was too bright and the world felt too loud, but something in me steadied. I still hoped I was wrong. I still hoped Grant would come back to himself, but hope was no longer the only thing I had. That's the part people don't understand about women like me. We don't wake up one day and decide to be cold. We learn to be calm because panic does not pay bills. Panic does not keep the lights on. Panic does not protect what you built. For a few weeks after that, Grant acted almost normal. He laughed at dinner, he asked about the shop, he even brought home flowers one Friday, which should have made me happy, but instead made me feel watched. Then, 2 days before he sent the message that ended our marriage, he sent another one that told me he thought he was untouchable. It came in the middle of the afternoon when I was helping a customer choose a coat. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket. When I glanced down, I saw a text from Grant, cheerful in a way that made my skin crawl. He wrote that he'd booked a weekend trip. He said I wouldn't mind because it was on our shared card anyway. He mentioned a hotel, a flight, and a reservation package he was proud of, like he had just won a prize. I read it once, then again, and my heart did something strange. It did not break, it clicked. Because in that message, without meaning to, Grant had done something reckless, something clear, something that did not rely on my feelings or my suspicions, something that left a trail. I slid my phone back into my pocket and kept smiling at my customer, guiding her toward the mirror, adjusting the collar with gentle fingers. Inside, I was perfectly still. I did not respond to Grant. Not right then. Not that day. For the first time in Chapter 3, when he thought he had won. I kept my face calm while my mind did the math. If Grant had booked flights and a hotel on our shared card, then the purchase had a timestamp, a vendor name, and a paper trail. Feelings could be argued. Paperwork could not. I waited until the shop slowed down. When my assistant, Jada, went to the back to steam a new shipment, I stepped into my office and closed the door. My fingers hovered over my phone for a moment, the way they do when you are about to cross a line you cannot uncross. Then I called the number on the back of the card. A recorded voice welcomed me and asked me to verify my identity. I answered the questions, my address, the last 4 digits, the security prompt Grant never bothered to learn because he said I was the one who handled those things. After a short hold, a woman picked up. Her voice was professional and warm. "Thank you for calling. This is Tessa. How can I help you today?" I swallowed. "I need to dispute some charges." "Okay," she said. "Are you the primary account holder?" "Yes," I said. "My name is Marin Holt." "Thank you, Miss Holt," she said. "Can you tell me which charges you are disputing?" I opened the app and read the entries, careful to keep my voice steady. A hotel in Miami Beach, a round-trip flight, a travel bundle that included upgrades Grant never would have paid for if it were just him buying groceries. Tessa paused. "And you are saying you did not authorize these charges?" "I did not," I said. Then I added, because I knew how it sounded, "My husband is an authorized user, but he made these purchases for a personal trip that I was not aware of, and he is currently in the process of leaving the marriage." There was a beat of silence. Not judgment, just the kind of silence that means someone is choosing their words carefully. "Miss Holt," Tessa said, "I am going to ask a few questions. Is the authorized user currently in possession of the card?" "He has his own card," I said, "under my account." "Understood," she said. "Do you want us to remove his authorization immediately?" My heart thudded once, hard. This was the door. I could walk through it, or I could stand here pretending I still had time. "Yes," I said, "I do." "Okay," she replied. "I can remove him as an authorized user and freeze the existing cards. That includes yours. We can issue you a replacement card right away." Freeze mine too. It was inconvenient, and it was also proof that this was real. "Do it," I said. She typed for a moment. I could hear the clicking. "All right," she said. "His authorization is removed as of now. The current cards are frozen. I am filing the dispute for these travel charges. You will receive an email confirmation within the next hour. You may also receive a letter, but I can set it to electronic delivery only if you prefer." "Electronic only," I said quickly. "Done," she said. "One more question. Are there any other charges you do not recognize?" I scrolled. My eyes caught on a restaurant charge from the previous week, a high-end place downtown I'd never been to. Then another, a boutique hotel bar tab, small compared to the flights, but they told a story. "Yes," I said, quietly. "There are a few." "Read them to me," and her tone softened just a fraction, like she'd heard this before. When I finished, she said, "I have included them. Miss Holt, you did the right thing by calling. Please keep any written communication you have regarding these purchases." "I have it," I said. "Good," she replied. "You will get that confirmation email soon." When I ended the call, the office felt too quiet. I stared at my phone like it might bite me. Then I set it down and pressed my palms against the desk. I did not feel triumphant. I felt steady. There is a difference. I walked out onto the sales floor, and Jada looked up from the steam rack. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "I need to make one more call. Can you handle the front for a few minutes?" She nodded without prying. That was one of the reasons I trusted her. Women who have lived a little learn when to ask questions and when to simply hold the space. I called my bank next, the one tied to our household account. The representative could not reverse what had already been transferred, but she could document my report, place a note on the account, and tell me exactly what time the withdrawals occurred. That information mattered, Denise had told me. It showed intent. When I hung up, my email pinged. Confirmation from the card company, a dispute case number, the list of charges, the effective time Grant was removed as an authorized user. It was cold administrative language, and it was the most comforting thing I'd read in weeks. I forwarded it to Denise and to Peter. Then I sat there with my hands folded, breathing slowly, the way you do when you are trying to not let your body collapse under the weight of what your mind just did. I did not text Grant, not yet. I went back to helping customers. I adjusted a hem. I smiled at a woman trying on a coat. I told her the color made her eyes look brighter. I moved through my work like a person who had practiced calm for years, because I had. But my phone began to buzz again, and this time it did not stop. The first text came an hour later. "What did you do?" Then another. "My card is not working." Then, "Call me right now." I waited, not out of cruelty, but out of strategy. Silence, I had learned, was a kind of power. When you respond too fast, you give the other person control of the tempo. At closing time, I locked the door, flipped the sign, and finally looked at the rest of the messages. Grant had spiraled across the screen, sentence after sentence, like some people do when they can't stand being ignored. "This is insane. You're trying to ruin my life. I swear to God, Marin, you always do this. You always have to make everything dramatic." And then the line that made my throat tighten. "You're 41 and you think you're going to start over? Be real." I sat on the stool behind the counter and read it twice, not because it surprised me, because it confirmed what I already knew. Grant didn't just want to leave, he wanted to leave me small. I typed one sentence. "I did not authorize those charges." Then I deleted it. I set the phone down and went to the back room to turn off the lights. On the drive home, the sky was dark and the roads were slick from a light rain. My hands stayed firm on the steering wheel, but my chest felt tight, like my body was bracing for impact. By the time I pulled into the driveway, Grant was calling. I let it ring. He called again. I answered on the third ring, not because I wanted to talk, but because I wanted him to hear my voice calm and unbroken. "What the hell is wrong with you? My card got declined at the hotel desk." I disputed the charges. "You can't do that," he barked. "I'm on the account." "You were an authorized user, not the account holder." There was a pause, a sharp inhale like he'd been slapped. "Stop playing lawyer," he said. "You run a clothing store." I felt the old sting, the familiar dismissal, and then something new. Underneath it, clarity. "I'm not playing anything," I said. "You made purchases I did not approve. The bank agrees those charges can be disputed. That is all." His voice rose. "You're jealous, that's what this is. You're mad because I'm moving on and you're stuck. You're going to be alone in that little boutique forever." I said nothing. "You hear me?" he demanded. "Say something." I stared at the wall of my kitchen, at the calendar still hanging there with a family photo from last winter. I could see my own face smiling beside his, a version of me that believed stability was love. "I have nothing else to say tonight," I told him. Then I hung up. My hands shook for the first time all day, not because I doubted what I had done, but because I could finally feel how much pressure I had been holding inside my body for months. I made myself a cup of tea I did not drink. I sat at the table and listened to the quiet of my house, the quiet Grant used to fill with his footsteps and his keys and his complaints. The silence felt different now. It felt like space. My phone buzzed again. Not Grant this time. It was a call from an unfamiliar number. I let it go to voicemail. A moment later, a text appeared. "This is Nora Klein, Grant's mother. Call me." My stomach tightened. Then another message came in from a contact I barely spoke to. "Hey, Marin, it's Luke. Grant told me some stuff. We need to talk." I stared at the screen, the glow lighting up my hands in the dark kitchen. Grant had always been good at getting ahead of a story. He liked to be the first one to explain things, to frame it in a way that made him look reasonable and the other person look unstable. I realized then that my conflict with Grant was no longer private. It was spreading outward, into family, into friends, into the social air we all breathed without noticing. I set my phone face down on the table and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, I knew, would not just be about banks and cards. Tomorrow would be about people.
Chapter 4. The Room He Never Prepared For. People showed up faster than the paperwork did. By 9 the next morning, my phone had stacked itself with missed calls and messages. Nora Klein had left a voicemail that sounded polite on the surface and sharp underneath, the kind of politeness that meant you were already guilty in her mind. "Marin, this is Nora. Grant is very upset. I need you to call me back so we can clear this up like adults." Luke had texted again, this time less friendly. "Grant said you froze the card. What are you doing? Call me." I stared at the screen in my office at the boutique, listening to the faint sounds of Jada unlocking the front door and turning on the lights. My chest felt tight, but it was not fear. It was the familiar pressure of being misunderstood, of realizing someone else was narrating my life to an audience I never invited. I called Denise Park first. She answered on the second ring. "Good morning, Marin. Tell me what happened overnight." I told her about Grant's calls, the hotel desk, the texts, then the messages from his mother and Luke. I heard my own voice flatten as I spoke, a survival skill I did not know I had until I needed it. Denise was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He is trying to control the story. That is common. Do not argue with them. Do not defend yourself to a crowd. Keep everything in writing." "I feel like I am being painted as unstable," I said. "Let him paint," she replied. "We will use his paint as evidence. Do you still have the messages where he admits taking the money and booking the trip?" "Yes." "Good," she said. "Forward them to me again. And I want you to call your bank, request the detailed transaction record for the transfers and the times. We may need an emergency hearing." I swallowed. Emergency hearing sounds dramatic. "It is not drama," Denise said. "It is containment. He already emptied an account. That is not a misunderstanding. That is intent." When I ended the call, I forwarded everything. Grant's texts, the card dispute confirmation, screenshots of his message about the trip, the bank notes I had from the household transfers. Then I called Peter Shaw and asked him to stop by. He arrived an hour later with a folder so thick it looked like it had its own gravity. He set it on my desk and opened it with the calm precision of someone who had seen marriages collapse before. "I pulled your LLC filings, tax returns, payroll documentation, and 3 years of financial statements," he said. "Clean, very clean. If anyone tries to claim your business is sloppy or shared, this shuts that down." My throat tightened. "Thank you." Peter looked at me over his glasses. "Has he threatened the business?" "Not directly," I said, "but he keeps calling it my little shop, like it's nothing." Peter's expression did not change, but his voice hardened a shade. "It is not nothing. It is yours, and it is documented as yours." Jada knocked softly and peeked in. "There's a woman on the phone saying she's your mother-in-law." I took a slow breath. "I'll take it." Jada handed me the cordless phone. I could hear Nora before I even said hello, her voice already in motion. "Marin, finally. What is going on? Grant is in pieces. He says you froze the account and stranded him." "I did not freeze the account," I said. "I disputed unauthorized charges on my card. There is a difference." Nora made a sound like a scoff dressed up as concern. "Unauthorized? He is your husband." I replied, "He was an authorized user, not the account holder. He used it for a personal trip he never discussed with me." Nora paused for a moment, then shifted tactics. "You know, people make mistakes when they are hurt. You two can talk this through. You do not need to involve lawyers and banks." I felt my hand tighten around the phone. He emptied our joint account and told me he was leaving by text. There was silence long enough that I heard the faint hum of the line. Then Nora said,
Grant said you were exaggerating. Do you want to see the messages? I asked, and surprised myself with how calm I sounded. Nora hesitated. What messages? The ones where he says he transferred the money and booked a trip with someone else, in writing. Another pause, her voice lowered. Marin, this is a family matter. It became a financial matter when he took the money, I said. I am not going to argue with you. If Grant wants to communicate, he can do it through Denise. Denise, Nora repeated, like the name tasted bitter. So you've already lawyered up. I consulted an attorney, I said, because I had to. Nora's tone sharpened. You always were dramatic. That boutique has made you think you're some kind of businesswoman, but you're still just selling dresses. The words hit, old and familiar. I'd heard versions of them for years, wrapped in jokes at family dinners, little digs that turned my work into something cute and insignificant. I didn't take the bait. I have to go, I said, and ended the call before my voice could crack. After I hung up, Peter said quietly, "Let me guess." I gave a small, humorless smile. She wants me to be small. That afternoon, Denise called me back. Grant filed a motion asking for access to business records and temporary control of certain funds, she said. He's claiming the boutique is marital property. My stomach tightened. Can he do that? He can try, Denise said. He can file anything. Winning is different. She explained the next steps in plain language. We would request an emergency hearing because he'd drained a joint account, and there was documented intent. The court could issue temporary financial orders to prevent further damage. It wouldn't decide everything, but it would stop the bleeding. 2 days later, I stood in a courthouse that smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper. The waiting area was full of people pretending not to look at each other. Grant was there with a man in a suit I didn't recognize. He looked tired, unshaven, and angry, like someone who believed the world owed him a smooth exit. When Grant saw me, he smirked, a quick flash of that same dismissal he used at home. "This is insane," he muttered as I walked past. "You're really doing this?" Denise stepped slightly in front of me, not aggressively, just enough to make a boundary. Direct communication goes through counsel. Grant rolled his eyes. Of course, she's got her little lawyer now. My face stayed still, but my skin burned. I focused on the details around me. The click of heels on tile, the soft murmur of voices, the fact that I was here, not collapsing, not begging insistently. When we were called in, the courtroom was smaller than I expected. The judge sat livid, expression neutral and tired in the way judges often look, like they've seen every kind of mess and learned to not flinch. Grant's attorney spoke first. He talked about fairness, about marital assets, a business built during a marriage. He painted Grant as a man trying to start over and being punished by a bitter wife. I watched Nora nod along, as if she were hearing scripture. Then Denise stood. She did not raise her voice. She did not dramatize. She simply laid out the facts. Grant had transferred nearly all funds out of a joint household account on a specific date and time. Grant had sent messages confirming the transfers. Grant had made travel purchases on a credit account where he was an authorized user, and Marin Holt was the primary account holder. Marin Holt disputed those charges, not out of spite, but because they were unauthorized and unrelated to household needs. Denise handed over copies. The judge looked down and read. Silence filled the room in a way that felt heavier than noise. Grant shifted in his chair. His smirk disappeared. The judge asked Grant a question. "Did you transfer these funds without your spouse's knowledge?" Grant's jaw tightened. "I was entitled to my share." The judge's eyes lifted. "That was not my question." Grant glanced at his attorney. Nora's lips pressed into a thin line. "I moved money," Grant said. "Yes." "And these messages," the judge said, tapping the paper, "are they accurate?" Grant's face flushed. "Yes, but she drove me to it." The judge's expression did not change. "I am not interested in your feelings today. I am interested in preventing further harm while this matter proceeds." Denise introduced Peter's documentation, the LLC structure, the separate business accounts, the payroll records. The judge asked a few questions, short and precise. Denise answered. Grant's attorney tried to argue, but each argument felt thinner against the paperwork. I watched Luke's posture change, his arms slowly uncrossed, his gaze dropped to the floor. Nora stared straight ahead, her face stiff, like she was trying to hold her reality together through willpower alone. The judge issued temporary orders. The remaining joint assets would be protected. Grant would be required to return a portion of the transferred funds on a specific schedule. The boutique would remain under my control pending further proceedings, with clear instruction that Grant was not to interfere with business operations or access accounts. Grant's mouth opened as if to protest, then closed again when he saw the judge's expression. It was not dramatic, it was not cinematic, it was quiet accountability. When we stepped back into the hallway, Grant's attorney pulled him aside. Grant's shoulders slumped as if someone had finally taken the air out of him. Nora walked towards me, then stopped a few feet away. Her eyes flicked to Denise, then back to me. "I didn't know," she said, and the words came out small. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to punish her, because anything I said would turn into a new story she could tell. Luke approached next, slower, awkward. "Grant said you were trying to ruin him," he muttered to the floor, then at me. "Those texts. I didn't know there were texts." "There were," I said softly. He nodded once, like he had swallowed something bitter, then stepped back. Grant finally looked at me, and for the first time I saw something close to fear in his eyes. Not fear of losing me, fear of losing control. I walked out of the courthouse with Denise beside me. The air outside was cold and clean. My hands were steady. My chest still felt tight, but it was a different kind of tight, like a knot beginning to loosen after being pulled for too long. Denise glanced at me. "You did well," she said. "I didn't do anything," I replied. "You stayed calm," she said. "That is doing something." On the drive back to the boutique, I realized I felt no urge to celebrate, no urge to call anyone and gloat. The only thing I felt was a quiet shift inside my body, a sense that the world had stopped tilting. Things were not over, not even close, but for the first time since that message lit up my phone, it felt like everything was moving back toward its proper place. Chapter 5. The Life He Never Thought I'd Have. The weeks after the hearing settled into a strange new rhythm, quieter on the surface and heavier underneath. Not dramatic, not explosive, just the steady unfolding of consequences. Grant moved out of the apartment completely within 10 days. At first he stayed with a friend, then with his sister for a short while, before ending up back at his parents' house in the same suburb where he grew up. I heard this not from him, but from Nora, who called once more, her voice tired instead of sharp. "He's trying to figure things out," she said. "This hasn't been easy for him." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how familiar that sentence felt. Things not being easy for Grant had always somehow meant that everyone else was expected to make room. "I hope he does," I said, "for his sake." She did not push further. She did not apologize either. The silence between us felt final. The financial part played out slowly, the way adult consequences usually do. Court-ordered repayments came in on schedule, smaller amounts than the total he had taken, stretched over time. It was not punishment, it was correction, the kind that does not make headlines, but changes the way someone has to live. Grant stopped texting after the first few weeks. The messages had dwindled from anger to bargaining, then to clipped updates about logistics. When he realized I would not engage beyond what was necessary, even those stopped. The last time we spoke directly was about a box of documents he claimed he had left in the apartment. "You could have just mailed them," I said over the phone. "I didn't have the money to ship everything," he replied. His voice was flatter than I remembered, less certain. "I'll leave them with the doorman. You can pick them up." There was a pause. Then he said, "You really don't need to be like this." I looked out the window at the late afternoon light hitting the buildings across the street. "I'm not being any kind of way," I said. "I'm just not fixing this for you anymore." He did not respond. We hung up without saying goodbye. Melissa did not last much longer after that. I never spoke to her directly, but the story reached me through mutual acquaintances who suddenly seemed very interested in telling me things they claimed I deserved to know. She had thought Grant was independent, established. She had believed the version of him that talked about a fresh start and freedom. Reality turned out to be less glamorous. A man in his late 40s sleeping in his childhood bedroom, arguing with his parents about money, watching court notices arrive in the mail. She left quietly, the way people do when the fantasy breaks. No confrontation, no explanation, just absence. Grant did not chase after her. He did not have the leverage anymore. At the boutique, life continued. That part surprised me the most. The store did not falter because my marriage ended. Customers still came in looking for dresses for weddings and jackets for job interviews. Jada still arrived early and made coffee in the back room. Shipments still showed up late sometimes. The small annoyances of running a business remained, stubborn and grounding. One afternoon, as I was adjusting a display near the window, an older customer named Ellen paused beside me. "You seem lighter," she said casually, "like you're standing straighter." I smiled, unsure how to answer. "I guess I stopped carrying something that wasn't mine." She nodded, like that made perfect sense, and went back to browsing. There was no dramatic success story waiting on the other side of all this. No sudden expansion, no viral moment. The boutique stayed what it had always been: steady, reliable, quietly profitable. And that was enough. At night, the apartment felt different, larger somehow. I rearranged the furniture, not all at once, just enough to change the flow of the rooms. I replaced the framed photo from our last vacation with a painting I had bought years ago and never hung because Grant said it clashed with everything. The quiet stopped feeling lonely and started feeling intentional. Occasionally, news of Grant reached me through the same distant channels. He picked up contract work, he argued with his father about expenses, he complained to friends that the court had been unfair, that I had changed, that women my age were vindictive when they felt threatened. I did not correct the record. People who mattered had already seen the truth. The rest were not my responsibility. One evening, months later, I ran into Luke at a grocery store. We stood in the produce aisle between stacks of apples neither of us needed. "I owe you an apology," he said, staring at the floor. I believed him. I shouldn't have. "I believed the version that was easiest to believe," I said. "Most people do." He nodded. "He's not doing great." "I know," I said. Luke hesitated. "You're doing okay, though." It was not a question. "I am," I said, and meant it. The strangest part was realizing how little I thought about Grant anymore, not because I had forgiven him, but because my life no longer revolved around reacting to his choices. The energy I had spent anticipating his moods, softening his comments, making space for his dissatisfaction, had returned to me slowly, like circulation after a limb falls asleep. I used it for better things. Long walks after closing the shop, cooking meals I actually liked, sitting with a book on a Sunday afternoon without feeling the need to justify my rest. Age stopped feeling like something I had to defend. One night, as I locked up the boutique and stepped onto the sidewalk, the streetlights casting familiar shadows, I thought about the woman I had been when that message first appeared on my phone. The fear, the disbelief, the quiet panic beneath the calm. She had thought the worst thing was losing a husband. She had been wrong. The worst thing would have been believing him when he said I could not stand on my own. I did not win anything in the traditional sense. I did not come out richer, younger, or admired. What I gained was quieter than that. Control over my own life, the absence of constant tension, the knowledge that I could survive being underestimated. That turned out to be more valuable than anything Grant took. If you are listening to this and it sounds familiar, if you have ever been spoken to like your worth had an expiration date, I want you to know something. The moment someone decides you are small doesn't make it true, it just reveals how limited their vision is. And if you have ever been in a place where someone else was so certain you would fall apart without them, I'm curious, what did you do when you realized you were stronger than they thought? I turned off the lights, pulled the door shut behind me, and walked home knowing that the life ahead of me belonged to no one else.